Hey, everybody. We are so excited to have our good friend Djordje Stijepovic with us here today. How'd I do?
Excellent.
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
Pretty good. I practiced. I thought maybe we'd have to dub your voice in, but
No, you're perfect.
Djordje is one of my favorite bass players in the world, a really unique musician. So we've been talking about this for a long time. It's great to finally get you over here.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for 10 years or so.
Yeah. So my first question to you, well, we'll get into your background a little bit, but what do you call the style? Do you call it slap bass?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We always called it rockabilly bass because for me it started with Bill Black, Elvis's bass player. That was the first person I heard do that when I was little. So we always called it rockabilly bass. But after kind of like taking a step back and reading more about what you've done, I think slap bass is.
Well, yeah, definitely slap bass is a more appropriate term for the technique.
Right.
And it started like way before Bill Black. Like I think that the first written example as a description of the style that I found was from 1915.
Wow.
And that's like when New Orleans band went up to New York and they played over there, and they wrote an article and they mentioned like slapping the bass, and I believe it was Bill Johnson doing it.
So you're from Serbia, from Belgrade, right? And so obviously a big part of what your musical influence is gypsy jazz, right? And Eastern European folk music. Were the gypsy players doing any of that? Like the guys that played with Django, were they playing slap bass?
Yes. When I say like gypsy music, in general Romani music, I would say that more of that like Balkan style would be my forte, but I played a fair amount of gypsy jazz as well. But I studied jazz, I did that like for many years, like
And
studied
classical.
Yes, and I studied like big band jazz and arrangements and all of that. And I love playing that style, but like gypsy jazz was for a certain period in my life, like was kind of like one of the main styles that I played.
Yeah, that's great. And you picked that up when you were much younger in Serbia?
I would say that all that ethnic music and all that Romani music and Balkan music was like more in my DNA,
Right.
I always joke that my heart is in 7/8. And but the truth is that when I was a kid, I was mostly into American music. I was mostly into rockabilly, into old rhythm and blues, into blues, rock, punk, and stuff like that. So when I was 9 or so, I got into that, and then I was really into it. Like for a few years, that was the only thing that was my interest, basically.
Right.
And then over time, when I was, I don't know, 16 or something, I got more into classical and jazz. And there was a period of time when I wanted to force myself, okay, so if I want to be a better musician, I have to listen just jazz and just classical. So it's just like for a few years I would do just that.
Right.
Played in symphony orchestra for 7 years, studied classical music, practicing like a maniac, and that was all I cared about. And then after a few years, I was like, you know what? I'm not really into fusion, for example. I'm not really into this, and rockabilly is still my first love. So let me put my own stamp on it.
Right. Cool. Well, you definitely have your own stamp. And we'll put links to all this stuff on the bottom of this. But Djordje's got a great website and a YouTube channel with lots of great interviews. In fact, you have an MA50 that you use for your podcast.
Yeah.
And during COVID, I would spend a lot of time listening to your podcast.
Slapstream with Djordje, live from Slapsville.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, what am I gonna do? There's no shows, there's no tours, there's like no really recording sessions, except some remote ones that I did during COVID. And I was like, everybody's doing the podcast. And then, I love talking about bass. I love talking to, some of my favorite bass players. And I used that opportunity basically to do that. You know, some of those episodes are like 6 or 7 hours long.
That's awesome.
It was great. I still plan to do it because I want to reach that 100th episode because I
Right.
did like 77. So I feel like I need a few more. So and there's like few more guys that I really want to put on it, and then I think I'll do it.
Yeah, I hope that you do because they're really informative, and for people that are into that, there's not a lot of places to go.
Yeah, there's none, you know, except my website, which is artofslapbass.com. You can hardly find any information that talks about slap as a technique.
Right.
Usually it's, as you said, rockabilly bass, and then you have guys that are just into rockabilly, maybe a little bit into psychobilly, but that's it. And I wanted to put something that it's evolving around the technique. So you have Balkan music, Romani music, gypsy jazz, even in classical they were using slap. So I wanted like to put more emphasis on the style of playing, not of genre of music.
Right.
So that was kind of my goal.
Before we fast forward to the United States and your career here, I noticed that your father was a folk music dancer,
Yeah.
and your mother was a music teacher, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, small world, and we're talking about cross-cultural phenomena here. But David Royer, as a kid, was really into Eastern European folk dancing.
All right.
And he still listens to that kind of music. He likes to try to stump us around
Nice.
the shop. He'll like, okay, tell me what time signature this is. And we'll be like, that's 17/8 maybe? I'm not sure. Which is probably just second nature for you. But for us, some of us 4/4 and 3/4 guys, it gets a little tricky.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I usually, when I teach odd-time signatures at different master classes, I usually compare them to burritos and tacos. So all these time signatures, you always have 1-3, which is a burrito,
Right.
and you have like some tacos. So if it's 7, there will be 1 burrito, 2 tacos. You know, 1 2 3,
love
1 2 1 2 1 2 3, 1 2 1 2, burrito taco taco, burrito taco taco, and then
that's
it's
great.
kind of like easy to understand or easier to
Right.
understand.
Yeah, once you break it down or have somebody break it down for you, it makes a lot more sense. But when you hear it cold, sometimes it can be a little challenging.
It
to
definitely.
pick out the pattern.
It
At
takes
least for
some.
me.
It takes some time to get used to it, but it's also another thing like learning it and then how you gonna perform it. You know, if you perform it in a way like you really studied it and then you don't really feel it. It's the same with jazz. If you don't have the pocket, you know, nobody cares about it. You
Right.
know, like you just play right notes in the right time, but there's no groove, there's no soul. And then all about, you know, Balkan music is about groove and soul.
Okay, so we get you from there to the United States. I know you played with Fish Tank Ensemble because I think you recorded at Mad Dog.
We did one album, and that's actually the first time I used Mojave.
Right.
And
Oh, was it?
Yeah, that was the first time Samer put out some. He recommended these mics, and then he put 200 and 100. 100 for slap and 200 for the body.
Right.
And that's the first time I used it, and then I loved it, and then I've been using it ever since.
Ever since,
Yeah.
right. That must have been in like 2007 or 2008, something like that.
Yeah, actually, I started playing with Fish Tank in 2007, in January, I think. So you might be right. Maybe 2008, 2009, something like that.
Well, you know, the MA200 is a tube mic, and that was our first product. And what happened was, the story with that, I already knew David Royer, and I had a relationship with Royer Labs. I was an endorser, and they would come over and do a lot of R&D at my studio, listening to mics. And John Jennings, who's one of the owners of Royer and founders of Mojave, brought the MA200 over, the prototype. And Eddie Kramer, legendary engineer-producer, was working, and I had a really beautiful pair of U67s, and we had those up as drum rooms. And John brought this MA200 over, and Eddie said, well, go put it up. So we put it up against the 67s, and the three of us are in there at the console trying to figure out which mic isn't a 67. So I was like, oh, yeah, this is great. And then I found out, you know, it's like, what are you going to sell these things for? And they said about $1,000. It's like, well, if you need any help, And that's how I got involved in
nice.
Mojave in 2005. But it was the MA200, and it's basically David Royer's modern day take on a U67. So that's that sound. So what we're going to do today in video part 2 is put up the MA200 on your bass and then compare it with some of our other mics and just see which one is still your favorite, if it's still the 200 or...
All right.
Yeah, because we've come out with a lot of mics since then.
Yeah.
So we'll do a nice comparison.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, Tiger Army been my pretty much main gig since 2015, I'd say.
Right.
So it's been almost 8 years now.
Right.
Yeah, we've been all over the place.
All over the world many times.
We toured all over the world, many times around the U.S. We've been to South America, many times to Mexico, many times to Europe, been to Australia, kind of all over the place. Canada as well.
Right.
I love touring with Tiger Army. It's great.
And is Tiger Army still going?
Yeah, we're still going. We did the record Retro Future right before the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And we started promoting it. 2020 was supposed to be the year, like for lots of touring, but we know how that went. And then we continued promoting the album right after. We did a couple great tours last year with Flogging Molly and the Interrupters. That was a great package.
Right.
We had great fun. And besides that, we recorded a couple more singles in this lineup. And yeah, it's been great.
And then tell us a little bit about Molotov. I'm fascinated by that band.
Yeah, I love playing with Molotov. It's they called me out of the blue, kind of, and I did not know about a band. I'm embarrassed to say that, and they called me in when was that? 2018 or something. I remember that I just bought a house here in Redondo, and it was in the middle of a renovation. They called me like, "We want you here in 2 days." And I was like, who are these guys? And then since I've been to Mexico many times before that, mostly with Drake Bell, who was my main band for a long time. So we had quite a bit of following, and I had like my own following over there, so which was great. So, and lots of friends that I made over there over time. And then I asked them, like, who are these guys? I was like, yeah, you have to do this gig. That's going to be amazing. And then I went there, and it was for MTV Unplugged. So that was cool that they were recording an album. And the guests were like me and Ana Tijoux from Chile and Money Mark from the Beastie Boys. So the whole experience was unbelievable. And we stayed in touch, and I toured with them actually like many times after that. So I've been like all over Mexico, and those are the times that I always look forward to. And then that album that we recorded was nominated for Grammy.
I have to ask you about one more of your gigs, because Big John, our engineer who's out there, who's another bass player, we're all bass players around here, wants to hear about Lemmy.
Oh yeah, that was great. That was a special experience. Yeah, there was something that I could not even imagine doing it when I was a kid.
Right.
I often joke that looking at my old photos when I was a teenager or young teenager, I had like posters all over my walls. I pretty much played with every single person that was on those posters.
Right.
Like all who was alive. From Elvis Presley's band to all the rockabilly people from the 50s, which was like my focus for such a long time. I played with pretty much everyone who was still alive, and but I could not imagine, even in the wildest dreams, to play with Lemmy and to have a band with him. So that was
with two basses.
Two basses, yeah,
Right.
and
what was the name of that band?
the Hat Cat. Because on drums was Slim Jim Phantom from the
Right.
Stray Cats. That's where the cat comes from. And Danny B. Harvey from the Rockets was the guitar player. So that was excellent. That was really fun. Wow. And we played a bunch. We toured all over. We headlined the rockabilly festival in Green Bay called Rockin' Fest. I think it was the third one. We were one of the headliners with the Little Richard, which was also another great experience because Little Richard was Lemmy's favorite singer, and so we went together to see the show.
Oh, cool.
So that was super cool, and I was, I was kind of a kid, I was in my 20s, and then I remember once when we were recording something here in LA, and we were watching that footage from that festival, and Lemmy hugged me and he said like, "Djordje, we're a funny band." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, we have a metalhead, we have a teddy boy, we have a punk rocker, and a fucking teenager. I was like, well, I'm honored to be that one.
Right.
It was cool. It was a great experience.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. There's some cool pictures on your website of you guys together that are really cool.
Great. A cool thing is that's kind of besides like playing with Elvis Presley's band, that's kind of like ultimate stamp of approval, in the rock and roll world.
Right. So let's give Jason at Blast Cult a little love. Tell us a little bit about your bass, because you can't just play like a traditional upright bass through loud amplifiers, right?
I mean, I can, but I prefer not to.
Right.
My favorite basses are absolutely Blast Cults, made by Jason Burns. They were from Orange, originally King double bass.
Right.
So some old school rockabillys probably remember that. So then he renamed the company to Blast Cult, and then they've been going. Now it's over 10 years, maybe 12 years or something. And one of the first basses they made was my Great White, white bass that looks kind of like similar to Gretsch White Falcon. And I've been playing that bass for a long time. He gave me another one, like a black bass. It's more like a stock Blast Cult. White one is more special. It has like different pickup system that the other basses don't have. And he's making me a new bass.
Oh,
so
cool.
I'm excited about that one. That one's going to be really
Well, we're going to have the white one in here in a few minutes, so that'll be on the next video. But it's got, what, 3 pickups or?
Yeah, the white one has 3 pickups, and it's kind of the prototype for Djordje's signature pickup, and has magnetics, has a piezo for slap, and has a piezo for the bridge.
Oh, okay.
I play a wide variety of music styles. I always feel weird like saying that because I always think about music as kind of like one thing, like music is one. I don't think like, oh, now I can play just rockabilly licks, or I can play just New Orleans second line licks, or Romanian. I combine everything,
right,
as long as it fits in the genre of the style of music that I play at that moment, or the band. But what's really helpful is I really need that acoustic sound, because I play a lot with the bow.
right.
And sometimes I play like straight ahead jazz gigs. These days I play with Bernie Dressel, the drummer. He has an excellent big band. We recorded an album as well last year. And I really need that jazz sound. So I use just piezo on the body, maybe a little bit of slap, sometimes tiny bit of that magnetic, but it's primarily the piezo on the bridge.
Right.
But if I play an arena show with Molotov, it's, you have like more chance to have like problems with the feedback. So at that point, I would use more magnetic pickups.
Right.
And it's really helpful. It's really helpful to have these options.
That's very cool. So your Great White bass, is it dampened any to suppress feedback, or is it just all done with the pickups?
It's with the pickups are the main thing. So
I ask you this because we have a mutual friend, Miles Mosley, who's also uses Blast Cult basses, and is a plays with Kamasi Washington, another monster bass player. And we did a recording once. It was a demonstration thing, and he showed up with this blast cult bass, and I was like, "Dude, this is great, but I can't mic this. There's no sound coming off of it." And he was like, "Oh yeah," so he had to go run and go pick up his traditional bass because his black blast cult is just like there's almost no sound coming off it.
Yeah. Mine is different. We play completely different style. My strings are, higher action.
Right.
Like I could say I'm more like old school bass player. I really like older music styles, but I like to make them contemporary as well, contemporary sounding, I guess. But my favorite bass players are the ones that have like a massive tone, like Mingus or the guys that played like New Orleans jazz style.
Right. So what's next? What's coming up next?
Well, lately I've been kind of focused. I just started actually that. Like I've been doing lots of like solo stuff, and I'm excited about it.
Solo with other guys, or like your music, or solo just you?
Kind of both.
Right.
But I have a band, and I have actually a couple albums coming out, and then I started releasing my own music, and it's gonna be. This first project is more rock and roll and rock, a little rockabilly, surf, all the styles that kind of influenced me. I never wanted like to, be just like one style guy. It's just not me, It's hard like for me, like even like this to put it in one sounding record. I would like to play, classical and jazz and rockabilly and punk and gypsy music and be all over the place. But I'm kind of trying to, make it kind of like one style. So I would say like a rock or rock and roll album is the stuff that I just started releasing.
Right.
And I'll be focused on that for a bit. But I also recorded a jazz album that has also some kind of world music influences,
cool.
with
Great.
Middle Eastern music and Balkan music, all-time signatures, and all kinds of stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by. This is just fascinating for me, and I'm sure it is for all you folks out there. We're going to wrap this video up, and then we're going to do some playing and listening. So see you there.